Before we begin, take a second. If you enjoy slow, emotional stories that explore love, silence, and the fragile bond between two hearts, make sure you subscribe to the channel. These stories take time, care, and heart to create, and your support helps keep them alive. Now let's begin. Clara had always believed that her life would remain quiet. Not lonely exactly, just still. Predictable. Safe. She lived in a modest house at the far edge of the city, where traffic noise faded into a distant hum and small trees lined the cracked sidewalks like tired guardians. The kind of place people pass by without noticing, the kind of life most people never imagined for themselves. But Clara had chosen it willingly. For years, her days followed the same rhythm. Wake up before sunrise. Prepárate. Sit by the window. Work. Come home. Sleep. There was comfort in the repetition. No surprises. No chaos. No heartbreak. And for a long time, that was enough. Until Daniel entered her life. She still remembered the first time she saw him. Standing awkwardly in a too-big jacket, eyes cautious but curious, hands clenched as if ready to run at the first sign of disappointment. He didn't smile right away. He didn't speak much. But something about the way he watched her, not fearful, not trusting, just searching, reached into a place in her chest she didn't know still existed. Adopting Daniel didn't just change her home. It changed her. Suddenly, the silence was filled with footsteps. The stillness replaced with laughter. Hesitant at first, then real. Her empty evenings transformed into conversations, questions, shared meals, and quiet routines that slowly became traditions. Daniel brought light into rooms Clara hadn't realized were dark. At first he was cautious. Always polite. Always careful. But over time he softened. He learned that Clara listened. Really listened. Without interrupting, without judging. He learned that mistakes weren't punished with anger, but discussed with patience. And Clara learned that love wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, love was sitting together in silence, both pretending to read. Years passed quietly. Daniel grew. The shy boy became a thoughtful teenager. Taller. Stronger. More independent. And Clara watched every change with a mixture of pride and disbelief. It felt impossible that the small child who once clutched her sleeve now stood taller than her, speaking with his own opinions, forming his own world. She loved him fiercely. But love carried weight. Responsibility. Fear. The constant awareness that one wrong step could damage something precious. Clara had always tried to walk that line carefully. Firm but gentle, protective but respectful. She wanted Daniel to feel safe without feeling trapped. Seen without being controlled. And for a long time it worked. They were close. So close that Clara sometimes believed their bond was unbreakable. As if the rest of the world faded away when they were together, leaving just the two of them, connected by something deeper than words. But change rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed. It started with small things. Daniel began spending more time alone in his room. His door, once always open, now rested half-closed. Conversations shortened. Laughter softened. He brushed past her in the hallway with polite nods instead of warm smiles. He was still respectful. Still kind. But distant. Clara noticed it in his eyes first. That hesitation. That pause before answering. That invisible wall she couldn't touch but could feel. She replayed memories in her mind, searching for mistakes. Had she said something wrong? Pushed too hard? Expected too much? Or was this simply what growing up looked like? A necessary distance she had to accept? She told herself to be patient. Teenagers needed space. Independence mattered. Love wasn't ownership. Still, her heart tightened every time he walked away. There was something Clara had always wanted to share with Daniel. Something deeply personal. Something rooted in her past, her identity, her way of expressing love and connection. A tradition. Not just an activity, but a piece of her soul. And as Daniel grew older, Clara felt time slipping through her fingers. She feared that if she didn't share it now, she might never get the chance. One rainy evening, when the sky hung heavy and droplets tapped gently against the windows, Clara decided to speak. She moved slowly that night, carefully, as if the air itself might shatter if she moved too fast. She brewed tea, letting the steam rise, filling the kitchen with warmth and spice. She poured 2 mugs and placed them on the small wooden table, where so many of their conversations had once flowed effortlessly. Daniel sat across from her, quiet, polite, distant. For a moment neither spoke. The rain filled the silence. Clara stirred her tea, watching the liquid swirl, buying herself time. Her heart pounded harder than she expected. Finally she looked up. "I was thinking," she began softly, her voice calm but trembling beneath the surface. "Maybe this weekend, we could do something special. Just the 2 of us." Daniel froze mid-sip. The sound of rain suddenly felt louder. "There's something I've always wanted to share with you," Clara continued, choosing each word carefully. "Something that matters a lot to me." Daniel lowered his mug slowly. He didn't meet her eyes. "I don't think I can do that, Clara," he said quietly. "No anger. No disrespect. Just refusal." The words landed heavier than Clara expected. She nodded slowly, forcing her expression to remain gentle, even as disappointment spread through her chest. She had anticipated resistance, but knowing didn't make it easier to accept. Daniel was growing up. He had boundaries. He had the right to say no. She knew that. Still did hurt. This wasn't about the tradition itself anymore. It was about connection. About whether he still saw her as someone he could step toward, or someone he needed to pull away from. "I understand," she said after a pause. "I won't force you." And she meant it. But as Daniel nodded and returned to his tea, Clara felt something fragile shift between them. Not broken, but strained. That night, long after Daniel went to bed, Clara sat by the window, watching the rain blur the streetlights into shimmering reflections. She pressed her fingers against the glass, breathing slowly. Love, she realized, wasn't just about holding on. Sometimes, it was about waiting and hoping. After that evening, the house felt different. Not empty, just quieter in a way that made every sound more noticeable. The tick of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rush of cars outside. Clara moved through her days as she always had. But something inside her remained unsettled, like a question left unanswered. She replayed Daniel's words again and again. "I don't think I can." He hadn't said never, but he hadn't said yes either. Clara understood something important that night. Refusing wasn't rejection. It was fear, uncertainty, a boundary he didn't yet know how to explain. Still, understanding didn't erase the ache. She wondered if simply asking had been a mistake. Maybe she had spoken too soon. Maybe she had underestimated how grown he had become. Or maybe she had waited too long. Clara tried to distract herself. She cleaned the house more thoroughly than usual, organizing shelves that didn't need organizing. She reread books she already knew by heart. She even started small projects she never finished, anything to keep her mind from drifting back to the kitchen table. The tea growing cold between them. But thoughts, like water, always find their way back. Late one afternoon, Clara sat alone in the living room, holding a photograph she rarely looked at. It was old, slightly faded, a reminder of where the tradition had begun. She traced the edges with her thumb, her chest tightening. This tradition wasn't about routine. It was about memory, about identity, about love expressed quietly, intentionally, and with meaning. She wanted Daniel to understand that. But wanting something didn't mean she had the right to demand it. That night, Clara made a decision. If she couldn't explain the tradition in words, she would let her actions speak instead. The next morning, Daniel found a small note on the kitchen table beside his breakfast. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional. Just a few simple lines written in Clara's careful handwriting. "I hope you have a good day. No pressure. No expectations. Just know that I care." Daniel read it quietly, then folded it and slipped it into his pocket. He didn't mention it. But Clara noticed that he didn't throw it away either. Over the next few days, Clara left small notes like that, tucked into his backpack, placed between pages of his books, resting near his favorite mug. Each message was gentle, honest, and brief. Never asking. Never pushing. Only revealing her heart piece by piece. Daniel noticed. At first, he read them with confusion. Then with curiosity. Eventually, with something closer to contemplation. He didn't respond, not verbally, but his behavior shifted in subtle ways. He lingered a little longer in shared spaces. He listened more carefully when Clara spoke. He watched, and Clara watched him watching her. She spoke about her past more openly now, not as a lecture, but as stories, moments from her childhood, quiet memories, small joys she had carried with her for years. She never framed them as lessons, never connected them directly to the tradition. She let the meaning exist naturally. Daniel listened. Sometimes he asked questions. Sometimes he just nodded. Sometimes he said nothing at all. But he stayed. One evening, Clara found Daniel sitting by the window, staring out at the rain-soaked garden. The light from outside softened his expression, revealing the uncertainty he rarely showed. She approached slowly and sat beside him on the floor, careful not to break the moment. "I'm not trying to change you," she said quietly. "I never was." Daniel didn't look at her. "I just wanted to share something that shaped me," she continued. "Something that helped me feel connected when the world felt uncertain." The rain traced lines down the glass like restless thoughts. "I respect you," Daniel said finally. "I really do. But I don't know if I'm ready." Clara nodded. "I know," she said. "And I promise, I won't force you." She meant it more now than ever. In that moment, something shifted. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but enough to matter. Daniel felt it. For the first time, he realized that Clara's persistence wasn't about control. It was about vulnerability. She wasn't asking for obedience. She was offering herself, honestly, openly, and allowing him to choose. Over the next weeks, Clara continued quietly. She lit candles in the evenings. She prepared her tea with care. She hummed softly while arranging small details around the house. She lived the tradition without asking Daniel to join. And Daniel noticed everything. He noticed how her expression softened during those moments. How peaceful she seemed. How deeply personal those rituals were. They weren't habits. They were expressions of who she was. Curiosity replaced resistance. One afternoon, Clara invited him into the garden. Not to explain, not to convince, but to sit. They talked about small things. About school. About life. About moments that mattered. "You don't have to do anything," Clara said quietly. "I just want you to know my heart." Daniel studied her face. And for the first time, he understood something important. This wasn't about pressure. This was about trust. That night, Clara sat by the window again, reflecting on everything that had passed. She knew she was walking a delicate line. Persistence without pressure, honesty without demand. Love wasn't loud. Sometimes love waited. And sometimes, waiting was the bravest thing you could do.